Og velkommen til en ny episode av Pausepraten. Mitt navn er Jens Bessesen, og vi skal fortsette der vi slapp i går, med selvfølgelig situasjonen med Mohamed Salah og hans rolle i laget nå etter det som skjedde i helgen etter kampen mot Leeds. Siste nytt er at Salah har vært på treningsfeltet, men at han ser ut til å ikke bli med i troppen til morgendagens kamp mot Inter. Og i dag har vi med oss journalist David Lynch, som kommer rett fra AXA treningssenter, der han har sett Salah i aksjon. David, you just got back home from the AXA training center. Salah trained, but the reports are that he's not in the squad tomorrow. What can you tell us about the mood and latest news?
Yeah, so did you see Mo in training there? And to be honest, kind of, I don't know, surprisingly maybe. He was all kind of smiles. He seemed upbeat, messing around with Dominic Szoboszlai, which is kind of funny as well, because Szoboszlai is the one who's took his place in the team. But there didn't seem to be any kind of enmity there. And he just looked himself, really. And, in a situation like this, you could totally understand if he was a little bit downbeat and, not necessarily sulking a little bit, but not quite as looking as happy and smiling as much. But he was, and he was in the rondos looking pretty sharp. I didn't see him end up in the middle of those rondos once, so he was doing pretty well in those. And just didn't look like someone who had the weight of the world on his shoulders at all. But of course, we know what's gone on. We know that bombshell he dropped over the weekend, and we also expect that he's unlikely to be in the squad to face Inter Milan. That the last I heard on that, and I spoke to someone at Liverpool, was that it wasn't exactly going to be fully confirmed till they got the other side of training. But that is the expectation, that he's not going to go. And we just wait for the official confirmation from the club now of the travelling party, which I expected in around an hour's time for when we're speaking. So we should know soon for sure whether he's going or not. But like I say, no signs on the surface that anything was going on when you saw him today.
So the mood was completely normal around the training?
Yeah, like even, kind of amongst the other players as well, kind of shouting and laughing and, the usual noise you kind of hear around a training session. It wasn't like anything serious had happened as far as they were concerned. And to be fair, you expect that, because I think professional footballers are very good at compartmentalizing things. So, you don't tend to see the effects of that. And even when they're in a bad run of form, which Liverpool definitely are, the mood around training is always good, as it should be, by the way. The idea is to kind of lift spirits and to get them in the right mindset. So, you wouldn't like to see people moping around the place. But, even with everything that had gone on, everything just seems kind of normal, to be honest.
What do you know about how the club has reacted to Salah's interview?
Well, my kind of understanding is that there's a hope to kind of smooth things over and calm things down. I think that kind of falls to Richard Hughes, the sporting director, and also Michael Edwards will have a role to play. It's never great when your highest paid player comes out and basically tries to go to war with the manager. And obviously they're trying to support Arne Slot through this situation already, so they've got enough on the plate. So it wasn't viewed as ideal. And in fact, I spoke to someone who works there, and it was described to me as kind of a selfish act. And to be honest, I totally understand Mo Salah's concerns. He's looking at some players getting picked ahead of him who aren't playing well themselves, and it does feel he's been singled out a little bit. So I completely sympathise with his view. But I think to go public like that it does feel a little selfish. He's kind of looking after himself a little bit, isn't he, in that regard? So, and not really thinking about the wider team. So that's the biggest disappointment. So I understand why there's that feeling. But of course, the job of those who are close to it, I mean, sporting staff, that is to just try and smooth things over now. There's not, we're not hearing anything of plans to immediately sell him in January. It could still go that way, by the way. But I think the ideal situation from Liverpool's perspective is to fix this relationship between manager and player, get the results back on track, and get to the end of the season with Salah. And hey, maybe a decision would have to be made then, but their ideal situation is to at least put it off till then, and at least get Mo Salah to AFCON feeling like he's in a better place with the manager.
But I think a lot of people felt that was kind of a goodbye speech from Salah. What's your view on that?
Yeah, the thing is, it could be as well, because as much as Liverpool are going to work to try and repair things, it could be that the player has in mind that he's resolved to go regardless, because, he might be thinking, look, if Arne Slot's going to be here, then I'm not going to be anywhere near the team, and this is not what I signed up for. When I signed the contract, I signed to be here for the full 2 years and being an important player still. And he clearly doesn't feel that that's the case at the moment. Whether he's right to feel that, whether he should be acknowledging his own form is not great, that's a debate, I suppose, for supporters to have. But that's the feeling he's got. And so the big question is that feeling significant enough for him to push for a January exit? Well, judging for his comments, yes. But we'll just have to see what the effects of the talks that will go on behind the scenes and the attempts to calm things down. We'll have to see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. What do you think this kind of attack from Salah means for Arne Slot's position as manager or head coach, I should say?
Yeah, strangely, I almost feel like it strengthens it, because I think FSG and of course also the sporting director won't want to be seen to their reaction to a big player speaking out is to follow his lead and sack the manager. They don't want to turn into the Chelsea squad of a few years ago where they had complete say over who's the manager. And the thing is, Arne Slot was already on thin ice anyway. I mean, he's very close to. You could make the case that if he loses 2 or 3 more in a row, he will go regardless. None of the willingness and openness and thinking that they want to back the manager. It doesn't matter if the results get to a point where it's untenable. So, strangely, in this kind of short term, it feels like it maybe bought Arne Slot a little bit more time. But of course, that's finite as well. And I do think that, again, if he gets results kind of go against him in the next couple or the next 3 or 4, it's just going to be a conversation of it being untenable and the manager will have to go regardless, which is also, by the way, from Salah's point of view, I think something he should consider as well is that just get to the other side of AFCON, just get yourself to the tournament. And it's not crazy to suggest that, if he does get to the tournament, that he might come back to a new manager, because Slot really is, as I say, on thin ice. So, I think Liverpool in the short term should be kind of thinking like that as well, because, the manager's not untouchable. His position's been strengthened a little by Mo Salah saying that. I mean, it meant that he surely wasn't going to immediately get sacked after Leeds. But if you lose to Inter, you lose to Brighton, there's a conversation to be had. And as I say, by the time Salah comes back, maybe this will be a completely different situation for him.
Mm-hmm. Do you know anything about how the other players have reacted to this?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of views. Look, I think football is very understanding about how things work, and that some players will do this, and that some players have, you have to say, egos, and that they will, when they're not happy, they will speak out about it. And as I say, they're very good at compartmentalising. I've struggled over that word twice now. Their ability to kind of just put it to one side and not have it really kind of affect the camp or the mood or anything. Just seen as kind of one of those things in the crazy world of football. But I also know there are some who've maybe not loved it, maybe thought that they prefer that it hadn't happened, because it just makes it easier if there's not a media storm around the club. But as I say, it's mixed views. They're all kind of individuals, really, and they'll all have their own takes on it. But that's just a couple of takes I've heard, is that some haven't maybe so much liked it, some not fussed at all, and I guess there's some who'll be in kind of the middle of those two.
How was your reaction to when you saw the interview on Saturday? Was it a complete shock for you and your colleagues?
No, I wouldn't say a shock, if I'm honest, because we know Mo Salah is like this. We know he will take it into his own hands. And regardless of what Slot says, it is significant to leave him out for 3 games. And more than that, it was 3 starting 11s he'd left him out. And 2 of those, he hadn't even called him off the bench. He didn't think that this guy could get him a goal that would influence proceedings in those matches. So it was a big shout. And so you only ever feel like you're not a million miles away from Mo Salah expressing his distaste about that. So not really shocked, but obviously maybe the speed with which he did it, I guess you might have thought he might wait a couple more games before, or wait till he gets to AFCON and say, look, I'm really unhappy with the situation. The fact he went so early, was maybe the surprising aspect. And the timing is interesting, of course. He waits till Liverpool have had that disappointing result. They've thrown it away in disappointing fashion, and he's thought, I think if Liverpool had held on, I don't think we'd have heard from him. But I think he's waited, and he's known that's his opportunity for maximum impact, particularly because he's very adept at using kind of supporters' emotions in his favour. He did it all the way through the contract talks, kind of drumming them up into a bit of a frenzy by suggesting he was more out than in. And he's definitely doing it now as well. Trying to say, look, this guy's leaving me out. Is this fair? Look at me, that's kind of the approach that he's taking. So, not maybe shocked about him doing it, but a little bit surprised about the timing, albeit, with Mo Salah, you knew he was never going to take it lying down that he was out the team.
But from what he says, it seems like there's more to it than just being left out of the squad as well. Like he said, the communication has broken down with Slot, and in the first game against West Ham, Slot kind of blamed the fixture list. That's why he rested Salah, but then for the next 2 games he didn't start as well. So it seems like there's more to it than just playing time.
Yeah, but I don't really buy that, if I'm honest. I'm not sure I exactly believe that, because I know when he spoke about his contract situation multiple times last season, he never gave up the full picture then either. He was very much kind of trying to manipulate things in his favour, which, by the way, he's totally entitled to. That's not a judgment on that. I just, that we know Salah's got that in him, and he absolutely... You've got to use your power in those situations to kind of get what you want. I don't begrudge any player doing that, but that's how he kind of works. And I think we're seeing something pretty similar here. He's trying to make out like it's a bigger thing than it is. I've no doubt that Arne Slot will have been straight with him and told him that at the moment this is what I need, and you're not part of that. But I don't think Slot would have been daft enough either to kind of completely torpedo any relationship when, Salah's worth a couple of goals off the bench from time to time if you need it. There's no doubt about it. And he does turn to him in the Sunderland game at half-time as well. So, the idea that the manager's completely sidelining him and is cut off all communication, I don't buy into that, really. I think that was Salah trying to, maybe add a bit of spice to it and maybe kind of strengthen his case of, look how I'm being mistreated.
Do you think it's become a problem for the club now?
Yeah, no doubt, because just anyone who's going to speak out in that way when you're already in a difficult situation, it is an issue. It's something they've got to solve. That doesn't mean that they'll say immediately we've got to sell him or take that kind of call. But it is obviously significant, and it's a problem that they're going to have to deal with. I think possibly the biggest issue is something they've got to think about in the next couple of weeks or so is kind of, is this just a result of the manager not using him well and not platforming him, as is the case for possibly all the attackers who, outside of Ekitike, nobody for me has been consistent this season? Or is it just a decline, and do we immediately regret the contract that we handed out to him? And so that's the call they've got to make. Is it going to be a change of manager that fixes this and fixes things for all the forwards? Or could we change the manager and Mo Salah is still going to be giving us the same, and we need to cash in on him as soon as possible and before anybody kind of clocks on to the fact that he has dropped off? And that's the big discussion for them to have, and that's the big issue. But that all comes back to giving him the contract in the first place. And, if they regret that immediately, then you've got to question the decision-making already, because, they had a lot of time to think about that. Did they just get seduced by the pressure that was put on them by fans? Did they just think that he will go on like this forever because he had a fantastic season at the age of 33? If he did, that was pretty foolish in my opinion. I would have liked to think there was more, informed decision making going on around that, because that ultimately, more even than Salah's comments, is the thing that's causing the problem. If it is the decline rather than how he's being used, they should have either seen that coming, or if they did see it coming and they thought he'd be more accepting of a bench role, then that's a severe misjudgment in itself, because that was never going to happen. So, a lot of the root of the problems really is what's happened with the sporting hierarchy and the decision they made over Salah in the first place, I'd say.
Do you think it would be the right decision to leave him out against Inter?
Yeah, I think there has to be some sort of small consequence for speaking out in that way. It doesn't help anybody. So, maybe one game where he's not taken and it just takes the spotlight out of it all and just calms things down a little bit. Maybe one game is not a bad thing. But I also don't think it solves very much either. This problem is going to be waiting ahead of the Brighton game, how he's used there, whether he does his big goodbye when it comes to full time. I mean, there's a lot coming up in these next sort of week or so that we're going to learn a lot from. It's a really fascinating situation, and yeah, just something that Liverpool would ideally not be dealing with in a season where they've been so up and down, or probably worse than that at times, really.
And we're going to hear from Slot tonight when after they touch down in Milano, how you think he has what it takes to smooth it over and turn this around?
I think he will in the press. I think he's very, very good at dodging these sorts of questions. So I don't expect us to get anything juicy out of that press conference, if I'm completely honest. In terms of smoothing it over with Salah, I think the biggest issue here is that, is it possible to smooth it over unless you just get him back in the team and he's happy with that? Possibly not. I mean, I'd like to think between Richard Hughes, Michael Edwards and Arne Slot, they could get a situation where they can at least get, if Slot is to stay, by the way, which is a really important factor here. But I'd like to think they can get to a situation whereby they can at least get to the end of the season. I don't want to see Mohamed Salah leaving out the back door in the middle of a season. I don't think any Liverpool supporter does. And I think even if you think he's completely finished and this is the best he can play now, there's surely a few goals in him, as I say, off the bench or just being around the squad. He might not be absolutely buzzing about it, but surely there's enough starts and enough appearances for him to just get through to the end of the season, and then he goes and gets his big move away, and everyone kind of leaves on good terms. I would like to hope they can get there, and I think Slot's got it in him. I think the sporting hierarchy do, but it is a big test of the kind of diplomatic skills, whether they can oversee that. But I think it's best for Liverpool if they do.
Yeah, and there's still some hope for that, hopefully. Thanks so much for your report today. We'll probably talk to you again soon, because I think this is going to develop further.
Yeah, I don't think this is the last we'll hear of it, as you say. I think big milestones coming up now in terms of, does he travel to Inter? Then if he does, if he doesn't, whatever we learn from that. Then of course the Brighton game, and then AFCON, where he will be given free rein to speak to journalists whenever he wants. It's going to be an interesting story.
Oh, I think Slot's looking forward to AFCON more now than he did in the summer, maybe. Thank you so much. Tusen takk til David Lynch, og du kan selvfølgelig følge presskonferansen til Arne Slot 7:15 i kveld på Liverpool.no, så da er det bare å følge med videre. Have a good evening, David.
Nice one, Jens.